All right. Well, thank you, Carrie. Okay, so I'm Ryan Scholl. I'm a project manager here at Wake Forest, and um, we're going to do a little demo today. I'm going to tell you how to use some generative AI to actually be more productive. So we're going to really show you how you can save time using some generative AI tools, and we're going to do that through some project planning. Um, so this is probably about a medium level of AI knowledge. It's slightly above beginner, but much less than advanced. So just kind of medium. And then there was just be some basic project management terms. I am horrible at watching the chat while we do this, but if you have any questions, please put them in the chat because I have a wonderful colleague, Mike Ayuso, who's helping. He is also a project manager who's much more senior than I am, but he is very well versed and capable at both project management and artificial intelligence. So he can answer any questions in the chat, and then we'll save time at the end for questions as well. Okay, so with that, we are going to start going through some of these slides here. Okay, so what are we going to do today? I'm going to show you how you can do some project management through artificial intelligence. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing. Then I'm going to give you a demonstration of of actually doing it. And then we're going to go back and go into the details and talk about the magic of kind of what we did. So I might breeze through some things in the beginning to really so you can see what I'm talking about. And then we'll slow down at the end and I'll kind of walk through what we actually did. So our process. Our goal today is we are going to create a project plan, or at least certain components of a project plan. Obviously, for any project managers out there, you know that a project plan has many, many, many artifacts in it. Um, we are going to pick just a couple for demonstration purposes. We're going to do a charter, requirements document, a work breakdown structure, a risk matrix, and a schedule. And it's not very important that you know exactly what these are. I'll show you some of these, and I'll show you exactly what our goal is going to be. So let me pull up. We are aiming to produce something like this. So this is a typical project charter. It kind of initiates a project, has basic information about a project, like a description, the key people, has the scope, your goals, deliverables, kind of the fun stuff like that. We'll also produce a requirements document. It says the requirements for the project, what you're trying to achieve. We'll do a work breakdown structure, which breaks the project down into deliverables or small work packages, complete with a work breakdown structure dictionary. We'll even do a cool visual picture of our work breakdown structure. We'll identify risks. So all the project risks, things that might happen, things that we know could happen. And then finally, everybody's favorite, the project schedule. So
Excuse me,
what
Ryan,
we're,
can
yeah,
you,
oops,
could you, got a request if you can make the screen a little bit bigger if it's possible?
okay, that helps, hopefully. Okay, I'll go quickly back through some of that stuff. It's not incredibly important that we see this right now because we're going to see it when we produce it, but sure. So again, this is our charter. Uh, Again, this is what initiates the project, has some basic information uh, about the people, what we're producing. I'll go through these again real quickly. These are our requirements. So again, these are the things that are required to produce the products that we are going to create in the project. A work breakdown structure, if you're not familiar with it, it's a representation of all the different pieces of, just going to use the general term, things that you have to produce to create a project. And work breakdown structure dictionary, that's really getting into the weeds, so we won't go into that right now. Uh, this is a picture that we'll show a little more um, once we actually get into it. Oops, let's just skip that. Okay, risks. I think we all understand what risks are, but this will identify the risks. It'll talk about the effect, the probability. Is it a high probability, low probability, the impact, whether it's high, medium, or low, how we mitigate it, what the triggers are for it. And this is our schedule. And I think most people are familiar with the schedule, but it's the tasks, the start and the end date, how long they're going to take, and then who's doing it. Okay. We will get into the output after, but this is our goal. This is our end state. So this is what we're going to try to produce. Okay. So now we're going to walk through an example. It's going to be a simple example. Our project is to create a podcast about artificial intelligence at Wake Forest. Now, I'm going to take a 20-second timeout. My marketing team has told me I have to let you know that we actually do have a podcast about artificial intelligence at Wake Forest. It's called Deeks.ai, and it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. So if you're interested to hear about what Wake Foresters do with artificial intelligence, tune in. It's a little over, I think, about 40 episodes now, but you can hear what professors are doing, what staff are doing, and learn all kinds of interesting facts about artificial intelligence at Wake Forest. Again, it's called Deeks.ai. But we decided to create this fictional project based on this actual podcast. So this is our example is creating this podcast. What do we have to do? So some colleagues were nice enough to hold a kickoff meeting with me about this project. So we actually had a real meeting on Zoom, a virtual meeting, and we went through and we talked about project goals. And this was natural conversation. We talked back and forth. It was on purpose a little unstructured. So we went back and forth talking about things, and when an idea popped into somebody's head, they would say it. Our goals, we said things like we want 100 listeners per episode. We want to record 3 episodes before January. Talked about the people we needed. We need a producer, a host, marketing director, an editor. Talked about some of the requirements. We need to do 3 episodes. We need to create a logo. We need to create an intro. We need to set up Spotify. We need to set up Apple. We need a marketing plan. How do we market this? We talked about our milestones. We want to record before winter break. We want to post them in January. And then we went into like the risks, what could happen, our assumptions and our experience. And all this, we had a Zoom meeting, we recorded the meeting. And again, I mean, there was an agenda for the meeting, but it was unstructured. People were talking about things here and there, and then they go back to other things. And the reason I'm saying that is it's going to be important down the line because the artificial intelligence will be able to pick out where certain things go. Okay, so that's our example. In real life, you'd probably have multiple meetings to talk about some of these things. You may have a meeting just about your risks. You may have a meeting just about your requirements. For this example, we wanted to package it nicely and put it into one meeting. Okay, so how did we kind of do this? What do we do? We took our Zoom meeting recording, we paired it with templates that we use. So we have a template for what we want a project charter to look like, what we want a requirements document to look like, what we want a risk register to look like. We paired that. We added institutional data. Now, institutional data could be anything that your company uses, like style guidelines or holiday schedules or PTO for certain people. You can load that in. Certain HR policies. You can even put an org chart in there. So you'll have everybody's titles and who reports to who. And then we're going to feed some actual project files into it. So you take all that information, and we're going to use Gemini for our example today because that's our Wake Forest supported tool. So we put it into Gemini, and Gemini helpfully spits out a charter, a requirements document, work breakdown structure, a risk register, and then finally a project schedule. Okay, so that's sort of how the workflow goes. We have our inputs, we have our engine or like our brain, which is Gemini, and then we have our outputs. Okay, so what are the tools we used? So for meeting recording, we just used a Zoom meeting. For our AI assistant, we used Google Gemini. For the productivity suite, we use Google Workspace, which is Google Docs and Google Sheets. And for our charting tool, we're going to use Mermaid. But you can use for your meeting, you could use Google Meet. You could use Microsoft Teams, whatever you prefer, whatever your company likes. For your AI assistant, go ahead, use Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever you like the best. Productivity, again, we use Google, but you could use Microsoft 365, so you could do Word or Excel. And charting, You could do Lucidcharts or Visio or whatever, whichever you want. These are just the tools we're going to use today. Okay, so we're going to get into a demonstration, and let me do my final stage setup here. So we're going to get a little bit into the prompt engineering in a second, but we're going to take our prompt, and our prompt tells us what we want the AI assistant to do. Then we're going to give it this helpful information. We're going to give it all this context. We're going to load in a template. We're going to load in an actual recording from a meeting, not notes from the meeting, not a transcript. So we're not even doing any of that work. We're just popping in the video. So we're putting in the meeting, and then some extra information. We're going to put the Reynolda campus holiday schedule in there, so we know when the university is closed for breaks. Okay, so now we're going to actually go and see this demonstration. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, this is a prompt that I, along with Gemini, have created. And we'll get into how I created the prompt in a little bit. So don't worry too much about this prompt. But what we're doing is we're asking it to create a project charter. So this prompt uses a certain framework that's called create. You give it a character, you give it a request, you give it some examples, adjustments, you give it the target audience and the extras. So what we're doing, and I'll make this a little bigger. I know this is probably hard to see. Okay, so right here, we're saying you are an expert project manager. Okay, so we're telling it, what is it? That you're PMP certified. We're saying, pay attention to the PMBOK. Okay, don't invent information. Okay, so we're saying all that. And then we're asking it, hey, we're giving you a Zoom meeting. Please produce a project charter. And then we're going to say we're going to give you a template. Oops. Sorry, my mouse went a little wild there. Yeah, we moved to a different. Sorry about that. Okay. So we gave it a character. We gave it a request. We said there's going to be a template that's included. We gave it some rules, and we will go through some of this in a minute. We said the audience is going to be our senior leadership, and then we told it the extras, like how to do this, what we wanted to do, the first pass, the second pass, the third pass. Okay, so I want to run this, and then we can talk about it. So we're going to copy the prompt. It's always a good idea to have your prompts saved so you can copy and paste them. So we'll go up here into Gemini, and we're going to paste our prompt. And then we are going to add context to it. So this is where we need to upload all our extra files. And we're going to go here, and we are going to include our meeting right here. So it's the video files. It's just the file. We are going to include the project charter template and then the holiday schedule. So we're going to add these 3 files in here. And the video is going to take a second to load. So while that's loading, we're going to go here and we're going to look at the template. Okay, so this is the template that we've loaded in the project charter. So we're hoping our output looks something like this. So we didn't type any of this in, we just uploaded a document. And we said, I want you to break the information from the meeting down to look exactly like this document. Okay, great. So all that's loaded, and we're going to run it. Now, if you'll watch it run, I am using a pro version of Gemini, and we'll get into the difference between the different versions, but it's going to tell you what it's doing right here. It's going to tell you what it's thinking. And we put something in here, and I'm going to go back to the prompts to show you. I put a pause point in here that, and I'll make this a little bigger, where you handle missing information. If the transcript does not contain the information needed for a specific section, ask me for clarification before proceeding. do not move on without consulting me first. So this is like a little check and balance that's usually good. Obviously, you've heard about AI tools hallucinating. This is sort of a check against the hallucination. You're telling it, hey, if you don't have the information, because truthfully, we had a meeting, there's a lot of things we didn't say. If you don't have the information, stop and ask me. Don't move on. So we'll go back here and you can see it's telling you what it's doing. So it's outlining, and this is fascinating to watch if you've ever done this. It's also really nerdy, but you can the model tells you what it's doing in these instructions. Okay, I love this because it just proved me way wrong. I just showed you where I said ask me to ask me any questions. It did not do that. Okay, it skipped that step. I'm going to show you something in a minute, but let's look at the output it gave us. Okay, so I showed you the template, and the template had a project description. I'll make this a little bigger too. It had a project description. It had the stakeholders. Now, what this said, instead of asking me, you can see it said information not discussed in the meeting, action item, clarify about the stakeholders. So it identified, we used our illustrious President Emeritus, Dr. Hatch, as our sponsor because, I mean, he's got nothing else to do now, so he's going to sponsor our podcast. I'm going to be the project manager, and when we discuss that, some of my other colleagues, we have a producer, we have a marketing director, an editor, and we have our host. Dr. Wente is going to be a stakeholder because she's very interested. And then we have our scope statement. So it talks all about what the project is. We have the goals. And like I said, we discussed the goal. We want 100 listeners for every episode. We want it to launch before January 5th. Now, what's very important, and I'm trying to find something that I hope it did. Okay, this kind of works. So I've run this probably 30 or 40 times, and it's different output every time because models are probabilistic, not deterministic, and we'll talk about that a little later. We have a podcast studio on campus at a building called the Waker Space. So I said we want to use the Waker Space for recording. Well, it doesn't know what the Waker Space is. I mean, that's a made up term. So it thought it just called it the Wake Space. Why am I telling you that? Because this produced a project charter that's about 80 to 85% correct. You have to remain the human in the loop. Do not just accept this output. What you do is you take this output and then you go through and you make edits, you revise it, you verify the information. It'll save you hours of work because you're not starting from scratch. You have a excellent basis to start from, but you still have to go through. So there are some things that you're going to want to put in here. You might want to add more assumptions. You might want to add more constraints. You might want to put more risks. Up here, it doesn't, when we got into the people, it doesn't put what departments people are in. So you might want to add all that information. Now, I asked it to pause. Now I'm going to say, why didn't you ask me any questions? Because I said to do that. So now it's thinking, it's sheepishly putting its head down. And hopefully it's going to come back and tell me that I'm right because it's very sycophantic and wants to tell me that it should have done that. So you can talk to these prompts in natural language. You can either output, you can download that project charter, or you can keep refining it through your model here. And you see right here, it is sycophantic. It told me, oh, of course I'm correct. I mean, this is the same thing my colleagues do all the time. Of course I'm correct. So it apologizes for that oversight. And it said, my instructions specify that if information is missing, I must ask for clarification. So it says, before I can finalize it, to add some of this information. Okay, so it says, what are the official titles? I'm sure you guys can see, I'm pointing at the screen. I'm sure you can see that. What are the official titles and departments? So it finally says, okay, this is the missing information. So there's two things I could do. I could put the missing information back into the prompt and then rerun it, or I can just download it and update that. something that would help with like the titles and departments are if I included the org chart. Now I chose not to do it for this example, but if I put the org chart in there, that would have clarified a lot. Okay, so that's the project charter. Once I downloaded it, I produced something like I showed you before. Let me show you some of the other artifacts that we created. I've already run these prompts, so you don't have to watch this, but this right here would be the requirements document. And again, it's another long prompt. It has a very similar format, same kind of character. So I didn't change that, right? I'm still the same project manager. My request is slightly different. I asked to create a requirements document, gave it some examples, and I can show you these prompts a little bit, but you can see this is another long prompt. And then it came through and it produced a requirements document. These are just things we talked about in the meeting, but it produced the requirement, the summary. It gave it a category. I didn't do that. It gave it a request type, and it identified the stakeholder. So you can see it went through and picked all these things on its own, based on the instructions that I gave it in the prompt. So it went through and I did, wow, a lot more than I thought I was going to do. Wow. Okay, so it gave us 33 requirements. Not bad for a 20-minute meeting. Okay. So now this is kind of neat. This is going to be a work breakdown structure. So if you're familiar with work breakdown structures, again, it's breaking down everything you're going to do in the project. And it kind of looks like an org chart. It breaks things down piece by piece. So here we have the project management deliverables. It has what we need to do for the podcast. Okay. This isn't the cool thing that, well, the dictionary is kind of cool, but unless you're a geeky project manager, that's not too important. This is what I think you'll enjoy. Okay, so I'm gonna have to go a little smaller on the screen. So I asked it to create a visual representation of that thing I just showed you. So all those words that is 1.1, 1.2, I said, turn this into a visual graph. Now, how cool is that, right? Mind blown. That's really cool. So now I also said, I put in my instructions, allow me to download this as a picture or give me code to put this in a charting tool. Let's see if this works. So I put a button here that says copy mermaid code, and perfect. This is actually what I wanted to see. If you see down here, it said something went wrong. I don't know why it always does that. Okay, something went wrong. It didn't tell me what went wrong. I don't know what went wrong. All I'm gonna say is fix the error. Okay, I'm not that smart. Just fix it. Just fix it. So it's gonna go through. It's gonna troubleshoot itself. Okay, so you don't need to know how to code. You don't need to know how to produce this. Just say fix it. So it's going to go through. It's talking to itself. It's going to say, I'll fix this by replacing it with a more traditional supported method. It's updating itself over here. And we're going to hope it comes back with something that works. Okay, while it's doing that, we're going to move ahead real quickly. So this is our risk register. Again, it made a risk, a name, the description of the risk, what effect it would have, probability, impact. Now we've determined the probability and impact. Nobody said this is a high probability, this is a low probability. And then it even created a mitigation plan by itself. So all this, again, was in our prompt. We asked it to do that. I provided a template. Remember, I showed you the templates that I wanted it to look like this. So I wanted it to have these titles, but I didn't say exactly what to put in there. And again, this is where the human in the loop is important. So once you download this, you would go back and say, okay, that's probably not high probability. Let's change that to medium. Or, hey, I think this is a risk. Mike's on my project, but he takes a whole lot of PTO, so he's not going to be available. So that impact's going to be high. So you might want to go through and change some things. You may want to add some risks or weather disruption. All right, we're in North Carolina. We're not going to get a whole lot of weather disruption. So maybe that's not a risk, or maybe it's a low risk. Okay, so let's go back to our work breakdown structure here because I want to show you this. So we're going to copy this code. Look, it worked this time. Remember, I didn't do anything. I just hit fix. we're going to go into a tool. I'm just going to use Mermaid for this, but you can use whatever you want. I'm going to paste this code. Okay, so you saw over on the left here, I just pasted this. I didn't write any of this code. I didn't write any of that. And it made this graph, or this little chart over here on the right. I think that's really cool. You can do that with Visio, you can do it with Lucidchart, any charting tool. You just tell your prompt what code you want it to produce, and it'll do that. So if you like visual elements like that, go wild, go crazy, create something like that. And then you can come over here and then well, that's just this is the code. And then if you when you use Mermaid, you could export that as well. But this is not an AI tool. This is just showing you what that is. Okay, the final output that I want to show you is the project schedule. All right, so this is what everybody thinks of mostly when you think of a project plan, but really this is sort of the final document in most project plans. This is the project schedule. The model took everything we talked about, all the different artifacts that we've discussed have built upon each other. So now the project schedule took the risk register, the requirements, the charter, the work breakdown structure. It took all that information that we had already created and made a project schedule. It created the tasks. It created who was going to do them. It created the start date and the end date, how long it might take. Created the predecessor, so what has to come before it. Again, so this is probably a lot more detailed. So this is definitely something you're going to want to download and put some human eyes on. But again, this gives you this amazing basis. It gives you a great starting point to work from. And once you download this, then you can go back and format that into the output that I showed you earlier. The expected output that we wanted to create. Okay. So now I'm going to go back and we're going to go back to the presentation and I'm going to kind of talk about how we did that a little more. Okay, so what's the magic? How did this all work? So the first thing is prompting. Popular term in the AI industry is called prompt engineering. I absolutely hate that term. I like context engineering better. And the difference is prompt engineering is knowing how to write a prompt. Context engineering takes a prompt but adds all that extra information. So not only did we write a prompt, but then we added the templates, the org charts, the actual meeting itself. So we put more context in there. When you write a prompt, good prompting techniques, you want to give the model a role, for instance. So when you use frameworks, probably the three most important things are to give it a role, give it a task, and then give it an output format. So this is who you are, this is what you're supposed to do, and this is the output. So a lot of people call that RTF, role task format. I got a little more specific in the ones I used. I created, and I used a framework called Create. Character, request, examples, adjustments, target audience, extras. There are hundreds of frameworks out there that you can use. So pick one that you like, pick one that works well for your model, and you can use that. But prompting and context engineering are the real secret sauce of that. What else is important? Your sources of information. So we wrote what we want the models to do, but it's only as good as the information that you put in. So not only did we include the meeting minutes, sorry, not the actual meeting, but we gave it that extra information, the holiday schedule, the templates. I told you it would have been better if I put the org chart. I actually didn't put it in so I could show you where it was supposed to ask me questions, and it didn't, unfortunately, but it was supposed to. And I'll tell you why in a second. But that's if you put the org chart in there, it could pull the different people's departments. It could get the spellings of people's names correctly. But if you have certain style guidelines or certain policies that your company uses, then you should put that in there. Also, include past projects so it has something to work on. Knows how you like to do things, what you like to do. Okay, this is the magic right here. And we're going to do an example in a second, but reverse engineer your prompts. Do not write your prompts yourself. That's a waste of time. First of all, have the model write your prompts. I didn't write those prompts. I worked with Gemini and I said, write this for me. So it created that long prompt. And what I did is I gave it an old project and I said, create a charter that looks like this. So I'm going to give you new input, and your new output, I want you to look like this old project. So it went through and I iterated probably 15 or 20 times with it. Said, no, change it a little bit here, change it a little there. So you do that over and over and over again until you get output that matches your expected output. And then you can use it for all new projects going forward. So like I said, I took an old charter for at least the charter example, and I said, I'm going to give you this input, make the new output look like this old charter. And it did, it got maybe 60% there. I said, okay, change this, got 70% there. Change this, 75%. I kept doing that over and over again. And finally, I got a prompt that I could reuse now for any project going forward. So the more information you give it, the better, the more templates, and you keep running it and refining it. So iteration is the key there. Pay attention to your word choice. Now, this is important. Words like must, need, should. Do you want high fidelity in your prompts? Do you want to follow strict guidelines? Then use words like must or need. If you want to give the models a little more creativity, so it uses a little more of its brain power to get creative, then use words like should or might. So it's very important. There's no right way or wrong way. It depends on what your goals are. If you want to be more creative, use a little more ambiguous wording. If you want it to be closer to a source of truth, use some more hard words. And then finally, like we talked about, ask for clarification. You don't have to be perfect with your prompts. Just say, hey, if you're unsure of anything, if you have any questions, stop and ask me. Which it didn't do. It made me look like an idiot, but whatever. I'll tell you why it didn't do that. Now, the thing, if you think that takes a lot of time, still put it in there and then write when it comes back, just use your best judgment or skip. So you can still have it in there and then just ask it to skip it later on.
Ryan, there's
All
one
right.
question in the chat about the reverse
Yeah.
prompt engineering.
Yes.
I think just reiterate one more time, like, how did you ask it to do the reverse engineer prompt? Did you say, you know, what prompt would you write to get this output? Can you just say that one more time?
I'm actually going to show you right now. That's what this slide
Perfect.
is.
Okay,
Great timing. Great timing.
great.
So how did I make that first prompt? Okay. I've highlighted this. Iterate, iterate, iterate. Okay. So this wasn't the exact prompt. It's something similar, but I couldn't find the exact one. I wrote into the model, help me design a prompt. And I said, using Gemini, because all models are slightly different. And I said, use the create framework. Like I said, that's character, request, extras, adjustments, target audience, whatever. Like you can use any framework, and you don't have to use a framework if you don't want. But it's very important. I said, help me design a prompt. And then down here, I said, do not run the prompt, only create the prompt. Okay, so that's what I said. And then I gave it some information. I said, you are a PMP certified senior project manager. Maintain strict adherence to the PMBOK. And for those who are unfamiliar, that's the project management Bible. It's called the project management body of knowledge. That's like the rules for project management. So it said, okay, don't stray, maintain that. I said, what the input was, what the task is going to be. And then I said, if there's confusion or missing information, ask me, don't make up information. And then it's a cycle, right? So you run that, you evaluate what you're doing, and then you refine it. And then you talk to the model. You say, that wasn't quite right. Change this a little bit. Then you run it again. That wasn't quite right. Do it again. And from that, that's where we got to, where is my, oh, man. So from that first kind of starting prompt, we got to this prompt, this long thing that this is how Gemini came out with it. It gave me a character. It said, you are an expert project manager. It's very similar to what I wrote. It said, this is our task. you know, we're giving you a Zoom meeting, give me a project charter. The output must strictly follow the format and section of the example project charter template. I didn't write this stuff. This all came from Gemini. I told it to edit things. I said, hey, maybe put something in there about handling this information. So you can see after some iteration from what I started with, that just a couple sentences, Gemini came back with this prompt. Okay, so I started with this, what's on the screen, or something very similar, and got that 2-page long prompt. Again, Gemini did all the work, so that's sort of a hack right there. And then I just conversed with it in natural language. I read through the prompt. I said, okay, this is close. But not only did I read through it, but I ran it against an old project and then checked it and then did it again. Okay, so I hope that answered the question. Okay, so I've talked about using Gemini. You have many choices of models to use. There's Gemini, there's everybody's favorite ChatGPT, there's Claude, there's Microsoft Copilot, and there's PMI Infinity. And right off the bat, I'm going to say for anybody who's used PMI Infinity, the model from the Project Management Institute, it's great at answering questions. It is not great at producing output. So go ahead, go wild, use it for questions. Don't use it for output. So I use Gemini because that's what Wake Forest mostly uses. I can't tell you it was the best one for me. Matter of fact, I might show you an example at the end of Claude. I think Claude produced some great output too. But how do you pick which model to use? The differences are very minor. I would say all the models do 85% of what each other does. So first thing, pay attention to what your company licenses you for. A lot of companies have rules of what you can use, what you can't. Out in the corporate world, most people are told to use Copilot. In the education world, Gemini is big. So use whatever you're licensed for, what you're allowed to. Prompting.
One question about
Yes.
Grok, Grok. Do you know about that
Yes.
one?
I unfortunately do know about Grok. Go ahead, go wild, use Grok. I didn't include it on here. I'm not a huge fan of Grok, but it's a great model. It's great at coding. I did not test it with this just because it's not my favorite, but it is a highly capable model. It is very good. If you are very familiar with it and use it, go for it. So yeah, use Grok, use DeepSeek, use Mistral. There's hundreds of models out there now. I just included some of the big American ones. Use Llama. There's tons of Chinese models out there. There's a couple European models and there's a couple American models. But yes, if you want to use Grok, go ahead. I did not for any of my testing. I also ran all the prompts against these 4 models. That's why I included them. So the difference, though, between using the models is each model will interpret your prompts differently. The prompt that I wrote, I put it into Gemini. It gave me good output. I also put it into Claude, ChatGPT, and Copilot, and got wildly different outputs. So every model interprets your prompts differently. So it's just it's a personal preference there. Which one do you like? Which one are you used to? Okay, so that's what, like, if you love Grok, go ahead, stick with it, go wild. Next thing is your style and your tone. So a model like Gemini is a little more professional than Claude. Claude's a lot more creative. Microsoft Copilot, that is the same as ChatGPT, but tweaked for business. So it's got more of a business feel, more of a professional feel to it. So you just have to kind of know what you're looking for. Are you looking for something that really expands and gets very creative? Maybe use Claude. If you want very adherence to guidelines and strict, maybe go with Copilot, but use that style, whatever you're looking for. And kind of along those lines, different models produce different outputs. Obviously, Gemini is Google, so you can export to Google Docs. Copilot is really good at exporting, no surprise, to Word. It's a Microsoft product. ChatGPT can kind of do both sometimes. It depends on your model or your licensing. But look at how you want the output to look and what kind of format you want to export. Okay, and then finally, what plan are you on? Like I told you before, I was using a Pro model. So there's different models. There's the Pro, there's Flash. So it's like a big model, little model, fast model. The Pro, you can see, took a lot of time. It was thinking. So it was doing a little more work. Flash models are quicker. I like to use Pro. I can sacrifice a little bit of time so I can get higher quality output. If you want speed, then go with a Flash or a mini model. I would always go with the paid model as well versus a free one. The free, or as I call them, trial versions, you usually don't get all the features and you don't get the newest features as well. And you have to read the terms and services because your data is probably being used for training. So whether or not that's okay, that's what you need to think about. But again, there's things like speed, rate limits, quality. So pay attention to what model you have access to, what you don't, what the versions are. For something like this, if you really want high quality, then try to use more of a Pro model than a Flash, something like that. Okay. So my final tips, AI models, large language models, other models like this are all probabilistic, not deterministic. What do I mean by that? If you put the output in, if you put some input, you will not always get the same output. You can't determine the output based on what you're putting in. It's all based on probability. Large language models at their very core, I don't love this analogy, but they're kind of like a next word or next token predictor. What's coming next? And it's based on probability. What is the highest probability word that comes next? And that changes all the time. So I told you I've run these prompts dozens of times. I've never once got the same output. For instance, when it didn't ask me a question, that's happened about half the time. It's probabilistic. It doesn't always do that. So you have to be careful. Don't think of this as like a normal computer program that you use that you're always going to get the same output. So just remember that they're probabilistic. The human must always remain in the loop. So always check your work. And no matter what we put in the prompts, there is a chance at hallucinations. So you have to be careful with that. Check the data. And like I said, you're only probably going to get 70, 80, 90% there. Get your output or talk to the model and refine that output. But it gets you started. It gets you a really good foundation, but you're the human in the loop. Now download that or export it, do whatever you need to do, edit it, change it. Remember, you're accountable for that output. You can't go tell your boss, well, Gemini produced this, ChatGPT produced this. Well, guess what? It's coming back on you. So remain the human in the loop. So like I said, refine the output. For example, in the example I did, all those outputs I got. So when I got the charter, I cleaned it up a little. I refined it. And then when I made the requirements, I put the cleaned up charter back in. I didn't use the one that was initially produced. I took that one, spent 10 minutes, edited a few things. And then when I made the requirements, I used my edited charter as an input to the requirements. Models are not great at formatting. You can get it close. Don't spend your time in your prompt trying to get this to indent 3 spaces or make this color. That's a waste of time. Get the information. Maybe they'll get better at this in the future, and some models can produce some cool visual elements. That's not the important part. Get the information. Get it out of the model, put it in whatever document you use, and then do the formatting. So don't waste your time on formatting. Use examples. So we use templates. We use a charter template. We use a risk register template. I had some PDFs of templates we've used. Here's an awesome hack. Use screenshots. Take a picture of your screen and put it in. If you have a table, simplest thing. These models can interpret screenshots super easily. Don't create more work for yourself. Take a picture of your screen and put it in and say, this is my template. This is how I want it to look. It works beautifully. And finally, like I said, you definitely want to have reusable prompts. So you can create them in, you can leave them in a Word document, in a Google Doc like I had, or you can create a Gemini gem, a ChatGPT, a custom GPT, or something in Claude projects, or I don't know what what Grok may have, or DeepSeek, or any of those, but something where you can save prompts and reuse them over and over again. For instance, I'm very familiar with gems and custom GPTs. What I could have done is created a gem, had all my source information already in there, so I would never have to keep bringing it in. It's in there. All I have to do is upload the meeting and just run it, because everything else is already contained. So if you have something that you repeatedly run over and over and over and over and over again, use a gem or a GPT or a project for it. So those are some of my tips. Any questions? I'd be more than happy to answer. And then also, just before I say that, listen to Deeks.ai. It's available on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And
Brian, thank
yeah,
you so much. That was great. I know I got some really good tips, and I appreciate all. You can see, everybody probably on the call can see now how you're an AI expert. So thank you.
I don't know about that.
Great tips. Ryan's going to stay on. So if you need to hop off because you have other plans, it is time. But if you want to stay on and ask a question, please do. Thank you so much.